UFC 330, Ian Garry gonna beat Makhachev by decision. I don't know if it's unanimous decision, split decision, but it's gonna be decision.
Respect Islam as much as I know how good he is and I know how talented he is. I know that I can beat him if I go out there and do what I believe I can do. Oh yeah, the lads want me to show you this. Here. I got this made a while ago, and I feel like this is something me and you would like. So, that is my Cage Warriors world title that I won in July 2019. And above it, when I got that one framed, I made this frame as well.
Fucking love it.
It's an empty frame that says UFC World Champion coming soon.
When you're opening your eyes in the morning, how long did it take you until you think about the fight?
Can I answer that question by getting something? So, to answer your question on how fast from when I open my eyes do I think about my fight, it's as soon as I walk out of the toilet and I just flip it over. 9 days until I become world champion.
Carlos Prates has been in the cage with Ian Machado Garry. He knows exactly how dangerous that experience actually is. And with the entire MMA world lining up almost unanimously behind Islam Makhachev heading into UFC 330, Prates just planted his flag firmly on the other side. UFC 330, Ian Garry is gonna beat Islam Makhachev by decision, Prates declared in an interview during UFC Fight Night. Gamrot versus Salkilled at the Meta Apex. I don't know if unanimous decision or split decision, but it's going to be a decision. That's not a hedge. That's not a fighter simply respecting an opponent's chances out of politeness. That's a direct, specific prediction from someone with more first-hand knowledge of exactly what Garry brings into the octagon than almost anyone else currently weighing in on this fight. Prates isn't speculating from the outside either. He's the last man to actually lose to Garry, dropping a hard-fought decision to him back in April 2025 at UFC Kansas City. Watch that fight back and you understand exactly why Prates respects Garry's game enough to bet against the consensus pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world. Garry manhandled Prates for the first 3 rounds using precise, controlled movement, getting in, landing clean shots, and getting back out before Prates could ever mount consistent return fire. Prates only found real success once Garry's pace started to fade in rounds 4 and 5, but by then, the fight was already decided on the scorecards. That first-hand experience matters enormously here, because it's exactly the kind of stylistic profile that's got Makhachev's own camp genuinely concerned heading into this title defense. Prates knows what it feels like to chase Garry around the octagon for 25 minutes without ever fully solving the puzzle of his distance management. He's lived through the frustration of eating clean shots while struggling to land anything meaningful back. If anyone outside Garry's own training camp has real, tested insight into whether that specific skill set could actually trouble Makhachev, it's the man who's already felt its full effect. It's worth pointing out how rare this kind of prediction actually is within the sport, a fighter publicly backing the exact opponent who beat him, rather than quietly hoping for a result that validates his own loss in some indirect way. Plenty of fighters in Prates' position might be tempted to downplay Garry's chances, subtly protecting their own reputation by suggesting Makhachev simply represents a different, tougher level entirely. Prates did the opposite, doubling down on Garry's specific skill set as something he genuinely believes can trouble the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world. Prates was blunt about weighing Garry's chances against the broader pattern of 2026 so far too. This year has already produced a string of genuine shockers across combat sports, with previously dominant fan-favorite fighters like Merab Dvalishvili and Conor McGregor both suffering major upset losses. That trend has plenty of fans and analysts openly wondering whether Makhachev, riding a 16-fight winning streak tied for the longest in UFC history, could be next on that list. Prates clearly believes he could be. There's also a more personal, strategic angle behind Prates' prediction worth acknowledging honestly. He's made no secret of wanting a rematch with Garry, specifically to erase the one loss on his record and settle the score from their first meeting. Prates has consistently stated, even before this exact matchup was officially announced, that he expected Garry to get the shot at Makhachev and that he intended to challenge for the belt himself against whoever walked away from Philadelphia with it. He was actually considered as a potential backup fighter for UFC 330 before the promotion ultimately settled on Michael Morales for that role instead, and he's continued to position himself as next in line regardless of who ends up holding the title. That context adds an interesting wrinkle to how genuine his prediction actually is. Rooting for Garry gives Prates a direct, personal path back to title contention, a rematch against a familiar opponent with a genuine grudge attached, rather than having to work his way toward a fight with Makhachev, a man who fights so infrequently that his next welterweight title defense likely wouldn't arrive until 2027 at the earliest. Garry, by contrast, has publicly promised to be a significantly more active champion, floating the idea of defending the belt 3 times a year if he wins it. For a fighter like Prates, hungry to stay busy and chase the title without a multi-year wait, that math clearly favors rooting for the challenger regardless of pure technical analysis. None of that necessarily undermines the prediction itself, though. Prates isn't calling for a finish, notably. He's specifically predicting this fight goes the full 25 minutes and gets decided on the scorecards, a detail that reflects real, informed reasoning rather than simple wishful thinking. That specific prediction aligns closely with exactly the kind of game plan most experts believe gives Garry his only realistic path to victory. Staying mobile, avoiding extended grappling exchanges, and using range and composure to survive Makhachev's pressure long enough to win rounds on volume and accuracy, rather than chasing an early finish. There's also a broader storyline connecting all 3 of these men that adds extra intrigue to Prates' prediction. Both Prates and Garry have separately spoken about wanting to run their own rivalry back for the title itself, meaning a Prates versus Garry rematch becomes a genuine possibility if the belt actually does change hands on August 15th. Even Makhachev has publicly floated Prates as a potential future challenger for himself, acknowledging his position near the top of the division. That layered set of callouts and future matchups means Prates has real, tangible stakes riding on this outcome beyond simple analysis, regardless of how much his first-hand experience against Garry legitimately informs the prediction itself. The odds makers, for what it's worth, see this fight almost entirely differently than Prates does. Makhachev enters as roughly a -330 favorite, with Garry sitting as a significant underdog around +270. That gap reflects genuine confidence across most of the combat sports world in Makhachev's superior wrestling and championship experience, built on a resume that includes wins over Arman Tsarukyan, Alexander Volkanovski twice, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, and a dominant welterweight debut win over Jack Della Maddalena to capture this exact title in the first place. Makhachev hasn't lost a fight since suffering a knockout defeat back in 2015, a stretch of dominance that makes Prates' prediction feel genuinely bold rather than simply following the crowd. Prates isn't entirely alone in backing Garry either, though his specific reasoning stands out given his personal history with both men. Other prominent voices across the roster, including names like Gene Silva, have weighed in with their own breakdowns of this exact matchup in recent days, with predictions splitting in different directions depending on who's doing the analysis. That range of opinion, even while the overall consensus still leans heavily toward Makhachev, reflects just how much genuine debate this specific stylistic pairing has generated heading into fight week, something that's been far less common during most of Makhachev's previous championship defenses. There's also real technical substance behind why a fighter with Prates' specific style might see something in Garry's chances that more traditional analysts miss. Prates himself is one of the hardest-hitting strikers in the entire welterweight division, and his read on Garry's distance management and movement carries weight precisely because he's someone who needed to close range against exactly that kind of elusive opponent and struggled to do it consistently. If a professional puncher with real knockout power couldn't consistently solve Garry's footwork and spacing across 5 rounds, that's at least some evidence the same tools could create real problems for a different kind of opponent entirely, even one as dominant as Makhachev. So where does this leave things heading into August 15 in Philadelphia? You've got overwhelming consensus across betting markets and much of the fighter roster favoring Makhachev's wrestling, control, and championship pedigree. And you've got Carlos Prates, someone who's actually lived through 25 minutes of trying and failing to solve Garry's exact style, willing to put his name directly on the record backing the underdog to pull off the upset by decision. What's your take on Prates' prediction? Does his first-hand experience against Garry give this pick real credibility? Or is personal motivation for a future title shot clouding his read on how this fight actually plays out? It's rare to get a prediction this informed by direct, personal combat experience against one of the two fighters involved, and that alone makes Prates' voice worth weighing more heavily than most of the outside analysis circulating this week. Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more UFC 330 coverage as Fight Week approaches.